The fog in 1889. London was thick enough to hide 1,000 sins, but it couldn't hide the knife pressed against Eloraine's ribs. She was alone, cornered in a blind alleyway, clutching a ledger that could bring down the British Parliament. Just as the shadow raised his blade to silence her forever, a hand in a black leather glove shot out of the darkness, gripping her assassin's wrist with bone-crushing force. She was yanked backward into a chest as hard as marble. Before she could scream, a deep, velvety voice brushed against her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "You are in grave danger," the Duke of Ashdown whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "If you want to live, pretend I am your husband." What happened in the next 24 hours would not only scandalize London society, but rewrite history. The gas lamps along Fleet Street sputtered and hissed, fighting a losing battle against the yellow pea-souper fog that had descended upon London. It was nearing midnight on a Tuesday in November, a time when decent women were tucked into their beds. But Elorraine Vance was not, by society's strict definition, a decent woman. She was a woman with a job. As a junior archivist for the prestigious firm of Simmons and Kettle, Elorraine spent her days buried in dust and her nights worrying about rent. But tonight, she was worrying about survival. Clutched tightly to her chest, wrapped in oilskin, was the private ledger of the late Sir Reginald Povey, a shipping magnate who had died under mysterious circumstances 2 days prior. Elorraine had stayed late to catalogue Povey's library. She had found the ledger hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Dante's Inferno. She hadn't meant to read it, but the names inside, lords, ministers, even a member of the royal household, were listed alongside massive sums of money for cargo that never existed. She heard the footsteps the moment she turned onto distinctively quiet Blackfriars Lane. They were heavy, deliberate, and closing in. Elorraine quickened her pace, her boots clicking sharply on the cobblestones. The footsteps behind her sped up. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at her skin. She took a sharp left into a narrow cut-through, hoping to lose her pursuer, but found herself facing a dead end, blocked by crates of rotting produce. She spun around. A man emerged from the fog. He was broad, wearing a rough wool coat and a flat cap pulled low. In his hand, a long blade caught the faint light of a distant street lamp. "Hand it over, miss," the man grunted, "and maybe I'll leave you with your pretty face intact." Elorraine backed up until her spine hit the brick wall. "I don't know what you mean," she stammered, though her grip on the ledger betrayed her. "The book," he snarled, lunging forward. Elorraine squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the bite of steel. It never came. There was a sickening crunch, a muffled groan, and the sound of a body hitting the wet stones. Elorraine opened her eyes. The thug was on the ground, unconscious. Standing over him was a figure that looked as though he had materialized from the fog itself. He was tall, towering over 6 feet, wearing an immaculately tailored black greatcoat with the collar turned up. A silver-tipped cane rested in his hand, the weapon that had evidently dispatched her attacker. He turned to her. The gaslight illuminated a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and eyes the color of a stormy sea. It was Samuel Thorne, the Duke of Ashdown, the Cold Duke. The man, society whispers said, had frozen his own heart after the war in Afghanistan. Elorraine forgot to breathe. The Duke was known to be a recluse, a man who despised court politics. What was he doing in a Whitechapel alleyway at midnight? "Lord Ashdown," she whispered. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. He stepped into a personal space, his presence overwhelming. He looked at the unconscious man, then at the entrance of the alley where 2 more shadows were appearing in the fog, men in the uniforms of the Metropolitan Police, but moving with the stealth of hunters. "Listen to me very carefully, Miss Vance," Samuel said. His voice was low, a rich baritone stripped of any warmth. Elleraine blinked. "You know my name? I know you have Povey's ledger. And I know that the two men approaching us right now are not real police officers. They are cleaners for the syndicate. If they find you with that book, you will disappear." The footsteps of the approaching men grew louder. "Hey, you there!" one shouted. Samuel grabbed Elleraine's upper arm. His grip was firm, bordering on painful, but steadying. He pulled her close, so close the buttons of his coat pressed into her chest. "You are in danger," he whispered, his lips grazing her ear. "Pretend I am your husband. Do not speak. Do not falter. Follow my lead." Before Elleraine could process the insanity of the request, the two officers rounded the corner, batons drawn. "Step away from the girl," the lead officer barked. "We've had reports of theft." Samuel turned slowly, shielding Elleraine with his body. He raised his chin with the imperious arrogance only a duke could muster. "Theft?" Samuel drawled, his voice echoing off the damp walls. "I hardly think a domestic dispute between a husband and wife concerns the constabulary." The officers hesitated. They exchanged a glance. They recognized the tone of authority, if not the face. "Husband?" the officer asked skeptically. "This is a dangerous part of town for a stroll, Governor." "My wife," Samuel said, the word sounding strange and heavy on his tongue, was feeling faint at the opera. She insisted on fresh air. "We took a wrong turn. Unless you intend to arrest the Duke of Ashdown for comforting his Duchess?" He stepped into the light, revealing his face. The reaction was instant. The cold Duke was a face known to every man in London, mostly through fear. The officers paled. They weren't just fake police. They were hired muscle, and they knew that touching a peer of the realm, especially one with Ashdown's reputation, would bring down heat they couldn't survive. "Your Grace," the lead man stammered, lowering his baton. We didn't realize. We were tracking a thief." "Well, she isn't here," Samuel said coldly. He looked down at Elleraine, his eyes, previously icy, softened with a terrifyingly convincing performance of concern. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Come, darling. The carriage is waiting. You're shivering." Elleraine, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, leaned into him. She knew if she broke character, they were both dead. "Yes. Yes, Samuel. Take me home." Samuel swept her past the stunned men, his arm like an iron band around her waist. They walked out of the alley and into the fog, not looking back. Only when they turned the corner onto the main street, where a black carriage with the Ashdown crest waited, did he speak again. "Get inside," he commanded, opening the door. "And for God's sake, hide that book." The interior of the carriage smelled of leather, expensive tobacco, and rain. Elleraine sat on the plush velvet bench, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Opposite her, the Duke of Ashdown rapped on the roof with his cane, and the carriage lurched forward, hooves clattering violently against the street. He didn't look at her. He was watching the street outside through the curtain, his profile rigid. "Why?" Elleraine finally managed to ask, her voice cracking. "Why did you help me? How did you know?" Samuel turned his gaze toward her. In the flashing gaslight passing by the window, he looked tired. "Sir Reginald Povey was my uncle," he revealed. Elleraine gasped. I didn't know. Few do. We were estranged. But he sent me a letter 3 days ago, claiming he had evidence of treason within the Admiralty. He said if he died, the evidence would be in the Inferno. I went to the library tonight to retrieve it, only to find a junior archivist scurrying away with it. "I wasn't scurrying," Elleraine defended, clutching the oilskin package tighter. I was saving it. I saw the names, Your Grace. If these men are exposed, if they are exposed, the government falls, Samuel finished grimly. But more importantly, if they find you, you die. Those men back there, the syndicate, they have eyes everywhere. They will be watching your flat. They will be watching your office. Then where are we going? To the only place they cannot touch you without starting a war, Samuel said. My estate. Ashdown Manor. I cannot stay with you, Elleraine protested. Think of the scandal. An unmarried woman staying with a duke? Samuel leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Miss Vance, or you are missing the point. To the world, as of 10 minutes ago, you are not an unmarried woman. You are the Duchess of Ashdown. We must maintain this ruse until I can get that ledger to the Home Secretary, who is currently in Scotland. And how long will that take? A week, perhaps 2. Elleraine slumped back against the seat. A fake marriage to the cold duke. It was madness, but the memory of the knife at her ribs was fresh. And the staff? Your family? I have no family, Samuel said, the temperature in the carriage seeming to drop. And my staff are loyal. They will do as they are told. The carriage ride took an hour, leading them out of the city and toward the misty outskirts of Hampstead. Ashdown Manor loomed out of the darkness, a sprawling Gothic structure of black stone and gargoyles. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress. When the carriage stopped, the footman opened the door. Samuel stepped out and offered his hand. Elleraine took it. His skin was warm through the glove. Remember, he murmured as they ascended the stone steps, we are newlyweds. We are in love, or at least we are infatuated. The heavy oak doors swung open. A line of servants stood in the grand foyer. An older man with silver hair and a stiff back stepped forward. This was Henderson, the butler. Your Grace, Henderson bowed. We were not expecting you. Plans changed, Henderson, Samuel announced, his voice booming through the cavernous hall. He pulled Elleraine to his side. I would like to introduce you all to the new mistress of this house, Elleraine, the Duchess of Ashdown. A ripple of shock went through the line of maids and footmen. Henderson's eyes widened a fraction, the only emotion he allowed. We married in a private ceremony this evening, Samuel lied effortlessly. It was spontaneous. Elleraine forced a smile, though her face felt frozen. A pleasure to meet you all. Prepare the master suite, Samuel ordered. Her Grace is exhausted. Elleraine's head snapped toward him. The master suite? As the servants scattered to obey, Elleraine hissed, The master suite? Surely there is a guest room. Samuel took her elbow and guided her up the grand staircase. A husband and wife who sleep in separate rooms on their wedding night invites questions. Spies are everywhere, Elleraine, even potentially within these walls. Tonight you sleep in my room. He paused at the top of the stairs, looking down at her. Do not worry, Miss Vance. My reputation for coldness is well earned. Your virtue is safe with me. I have no interest in romance, only in survival. He opened the door to a massive bedroom dominated by a 4-poster bed draped in heavy crimson velvet. A fire roared in the grate. Lock the door, he said, walking over to a desk and pouring a glass of brandy. I will take the chaise lounge. Elleraine stood in the middle of the room, still holding the ledger. She watched the Duke of Ashdown remove his coat, revealing a shoulder holster with a loaded Webley revolver. He placed the gun on the nightstand. Sleep well, Duchess, he said, turning his back to her. Tomorrow, the wolves come to call. Morning light filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, grey and muted. Elleraine woke with a start, disoriented. For a moment, she thought she was back in her cramped boarding house in Cheapside. Then she saw the frescoed ceiling and the man shaving in front of the vanity mirror. Samuel was shirtless. Elleraine quickly pulled the duvet up to her chin, her face heating up. She had never seen a man without a shirt, let alone a duke. His back was a map of scars, thin white lines that looked like whip marks, and a jagged, puckered scar on his shoulder that suggested a bullet wound. The physical toll of his time in the military was undeniable. He saw her reflection in the mirror. "Breakfast is on the table. Eat. We have visitors." Elleraine sat up, noticing a tray of toast, eggs, and strong tea. "Visitors? Already?" Samuel wiped his face with a towel and turned. He had donned a fresh white shirt, but it was unbuttoned at the collar. "News travels fast. Lady Beatrice Sterling is downstairs. She is the doyenne of London gossip and, unfortunately, my godmother." "Lady Sterling," Elleraine choked on her tea. "She writes the society column for the Times. If she suspects anything, she will destroy us," Samuel agreed calmly. "She has come to inspect you. She believes I was destined to marry her niece, a vapid creature named Clarissa. You have stolen that future. Beatrice will be looking for cracks in our story." He walked over to the bed and tossed a velvet box onto the mattress. "Put these on." Elleraine opened the box. Inside lay the Ashdown emeralds, a necklace of stones so large and green they looked like deep forest pools surrounded by diamonds. "These are priceless," Elleraine whispered. "They are necessary. They signal that you are mine." Samuel walked to the wardrobe and pulled out a dress. It was a day dress of pale blue silk, far finer than anything Elleraine had ever touched. "I had my mother's old dresses brought down from the attic. They should fit. You have a similar stature." An hour later, Elleraine descended the stairs, the heavy emeralds cool against her throat. Samuel waited at the bottom, dressed in a morning suit. He looked up, and for a second his mask slipped. His eyes widened, and he stopped tapping his cane. "You look—" He cleared his throat, the cold mask slamming back into place. "Adequate. Remember, you adore me. You find my brooding nature mysterious and romantic. And you are not a librarian. You are the daughter of a country squire from Derbyshire." "My father was a watchmaker," Elleraine said defiantly. "Today, he is a squire. Come." They entered the drawing room. Sitting on the floral sofa was a woman who looked like a bird of prey wrapped in purple satin. Lady Beatrice Sterling held a teacup like a weapon. "So," Beatrice said, not rising, "this is the creature that bewitched the stone heart." Samuel led Elleraine into the room, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. "Aunt Beatrice, may I present my wife, Elleraine?" Elleraine curtsied, her knees shaking. "Lady Sterling, it is an honor." Beatrice peered at her through a lorgnette. "A country mouse. Pretty enough, I suppose, in a simple way, but hardly the stock for a duchess. Tell me, child, how did you meet? Samuel has been in London. You have been in... where was it?" "Derbyshire," Elleraine lied, her voice steadying. She looked at Samuel. "We met in the library of my father's estate." Samuel was looking for a rare text on naval history. "I was looking for solitude," Samuel added, looking down at Elleraine with a simulated warmth that made her toes curl. "I found conversation instead. It was disarming." Beatrice narrowed her eyes. "A whirlwind romance?" "Samuel Vane does not do whirlwind. He calculates. He plans." She stood up and walked around Elleraine, inspecting her. She stopped at the necklace. "The Ashdown emeralds," Beatrice murmured. "He hasn't let a woman wear these since his mother died. He must truly be insane." "I love him," Elleraine blurted out. She realized she had to go on the offensive. She stepped closer to Samuel and took his hand, intertwining their fingers. I know he is hard. I know he is guarded. But he saved me. She looked up at Samuel, channeling the fear from the alleyway, the gratitude she actually felt. He is my protector. Samuel squeezed her hand back. There was a moment of silence in the room that felt heavy with electricity. Suddenly, the drawing room doors burst open. Henderson, the butler, looked flustered. "Your Grace, I tried to stop him." A man strode in. He was handsome in a slick, dangerous way, wearing a suit that was too fashionable. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow. It was Lord Jasper Sterling, Lady Beatrice's son and Samuel's cousin. "Married?" Jasper laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "My dear cousin Samuel, married? I had to see it to believe it." Samuel stiffened beside Elleraine. The muscles in his arm turned to rock. "Jasper," Samuel greeted, his voice dropping an octave. "I didn't know you were in the country." "I just arrived from Paris," Jasper said. He walked up to Elleraine and took her hand, raising it to his lips. His eyes, cold and predatory, locked onto hers. "Charmed, new cousin. Although, you look familiar." Elleraine's blood ran cold. Jasper Sterling. She had seen his name. It was in the ledger. He wasn't just Samuel's cousin. According to Povey's book, Jasper Sterling was the financer of the illegal arms deals. He was a member of the syndicate. Jasper lingered over her hand, his thumb brushing her skin. "Yes, very familiar. Did you ever work in the city, my dear? Perhaps near Fleet Street?" Samuel stepped between them, breaking the contact. "She has never been to the city, Jasper. She finds the air choking." "Is that so?" Jasper smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, we must celebrate. The masked ball at the Opera House is tomorrow night. You must come. Introduce your bride to society properly." "We prefer a quiet life," Samuel said. "Nonsense," Beatrice chimed in, standing up. "Jasper is right. If you hide her away, people will talk. They will say she is pregnant or unpresentable. Bring her to the ball, Samuel. Unless you have something to hide." Samuel looked at Jasper. The two men stared at each other, a silent war passing between them. Samuel knew that Jasper was testing him. If they didn't go, Jasper would investigate Elleraine. "We will be there," Samuel said tightly. "Excellent," Jasper grinned. "It's a masquerade. How fitting. Everyone can wear their true faces." As Beatrice and Jasper left, Elleraine collapsed onto the sofa. "He knows," she whispered. "He suspects." Samuel went to the window, watching his cousin's carriage depart. "Jasper is the spider mentioned in the ledger. I am sure of it now." He turned to Elleraine. "Tomorrow night, we go to the opera. We aren't just going to dance, Elleraine. We are going to use you as bait." "Bait?" Elleraine stood up. "You said you would protect me." "The best way to protect you is to end this," Samuel said, walking over to her. He reached out and touched the emeralds at her throat. "Jasper needs the ledger. He will try to get you alone at the ball. And when he does—" Samuel's eyes burned with a dark, terrifying resolve. "When he does, I will kill him." The Royal Opera House in Covent Garden was a cavern of gold leaf, red velvet, and hypocrisy. It was the night of the masquerade, the highlight of the winter season, where the aristocracy hid their faces behind silk and feathers to indulge in their darkest vices. Elleraine stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand resting on Samuel's arm. She was no longer the grey mouse of the archives. Samuel had dressed her in a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her figure, with a bodice so daring she felt exposed despite the fabric. A mask of black lace covered the upper half of her face, making her eyes look like bright stars in a dark sky. Around her neck, the ashdown emeralds glittered with a heavy, ancient menace. "Breathe," Samuel murmured, his voice barely audible over the swelling orchestra. He wore a simple black domino mask, but his height and the sheer aura of power radiating from him made him instantly recognizable. "Fear is a scent, Elleraine, and these people are sharks." "I'm not afraid of them," Elleraine whispered back, surprised to find it was true. "I'm afraid of what happens when the music stops." "Then let us ensure the music plays on." They descended the stairs, heads turned, whispers hissed behind fans like snakes in dry grass. The cold duke, the mystery bride. Is it true she was a barmaid, a princess in exile? Jasper Sterling was waiting at the bottom, dressed as a Venetian executioner in red and black. He bowed low, a mockery of respect. "Cousin?" Jasper smiled, his teeth white against the dark mask. "And the lovely Duchess. You have stolen the breath from the room." "Jasper," Samuel nodded curtly. "A fitting costume, though a bit on the nose, isn't it?" Jasper laughed, stepping closer to Elleraine. "May I steal the bride for the first waltz? It is tradition." Samuel's grip on Elleraine's arm tightened imperceptibly. He wanted to say no. Elleraine could feel the violence coiling in his muscles, but to refuse would be a breach of etiquette that would draw every eye in the room, and they needed to look like a happy, secure couple. "If my wife consents," Samuel said, his voice like grinding stones. Elleraine looked at Jasper. She saw the malice in his eyes, but she also remembered the ledger. She remembered the list of shipments, gunpowder, rifles, poison. Jasper wasn't just a bad man. He was a traitor. "I would be delighted," Elleraine lied, stepping forward. Samuel let her go, but his eyes promised retribution. Jasper swept her onto the dance floor. The orchestra began a Strauss waltz. Jasper was a good dancer, fluid and strong, but holding him was like holding a cobra. "You act the part well," Jasper whispered as he spun her near the edge of the crowd. "But I checked the parish records in Derbyshire. There is no Squire Vance." Elleraine didn't stumble. She kept her chin high. "My father was a private man. Records get lost." "Not that lost." Jasper tightened his grip on her waist, pulling her uncomfortably close. "And then I checked the employment records at Simmons and Kettle. A Miss Elleraine Vance disappeared 3 days ago, the same night my associate was found unconscious in an alley." He spun her again, dipping her low so her head rushed. "Where is the book, Elleraine?" He hissed into her neck. "Samuel cannot save you here. I have 20 men in this hall. Give me the ledger, and I will let you walk away. I'll even give you enough money to start a new life in America." Elleraine looked up at the balconies. She saw shadows moving that shouldn't be there. He wasn't lying. "I don't have it," she said, breathlessly, as he pulled her back up. "Liar. Samuel is sentimental. He wouldn't destroy his uncle's legacy. It's at the manor, isn't it?" "I burned it," Elleraine bluffed. "I burned it in the fireplace the night we arrived." Jasper stopped dancing. People bumped into them, murmuring apologies. But he didn't move. His eyes behind the mask were black pits. "If you burned it," he said softly, "then you are the only record left, which means I don't need the book. I just need to silence you." The music seemed to screech to a halt in Elleraine's mind. Jasper smiled, released her hand, and stepped back, melting into the crowd of dancers. Elleraine turned to find Samuel, panic rising in her throat. She saw him across the room, cornered by 3 men in military uniforms. They weren't chatting. They were blocking him. Suddenly, a waiter bumped into Elleraine, spilling a tray of champagne down the front of her dress. "Oh, 1,000 pardons, my lady," the waiter cried, grabbing her arm with a grip of iron. "Come this way. Let us clean you up." "No, Elleraine tried to pull away, but the waiter shoved a wet cloth against her face. It smelled of chloroform. The ballroom spun. The chandeliers blurred into streaks of light. The last thing she saw was Samuel's head snapping toward her, his eyes widening in horror before darkness took her. Elleraine woke to the smell of damp earth and rot. She was tied to a wooden chair in a stone room. Water dripped from the ceiling. It was cold, bone-deep cold. She blinked, her head throbbing from the chloroform. "Welcome back, Duchess." Jasper Sterling sat on a crate opposite her, cleaning his fingernails with a small dagger. He had removed his mask. "Where are we?" Elleraine croaked. "Beneath the opera house," Jasper said pleasantly. "The old foundations. The acoustics are wonderful upstairs, but down here, no one can hear you scream. It's poetic, really." He stood up and walked toward her. "Let's cut to the chase. You didn't burn the ledger. You're too smart for that. You know it's your insurance policy. So you're going to tell me where it is." "I told you," Elleraine gasped. "It's gone." Jasper backhanded her. It wasn't a hard slap, but the ring on his finger cut her lip. She tasted copper. "I have men at Ashdown Manor right now," Jasper said, "tearing it apart, but it's a big house. If you tell me, I'll make your death quick. If you don't, well, I have a creative imagination." Elleraine's mind raced. She thought of the ledger. She hadn't burned it, but she hadn't left it at the manor either. She had sewn the pages into the lining of her petticoats. She was sitting on them right now. "Samuel will come for me," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "Samuel is dead," Jasper laughed. "My men had orders to shoot on sight once I had you secure." "You're wrong," a voice echoed from the shadows of the tunnel entrance. Jasper spun around. Samuel stood in the archway. He was a mess. His coat was torn, his white shirt stained with blood that wasn't entirely his own. He held his silver-tipped cane in one hand and a Webley revolver in the other. "Samuel!" Elleraine cried. "Let her go, Jasper," Samuel said, stepping into the light. He didn't look at Elleraine. His focus was entirely on his cousin. He moved with the predatory grace of a tiger. "This ends tonight." "How did you get past the guards?" Jasper sneered, though he took a step back, raising his dagger. "I didn't get past them," Samuel said coldly. "I went through them." Jasper whistled. From the dark corners of the room, 4 more men emerged, holding heavy clubs and knives. "You're outnumbered, cousin. You're exhausted. And you're old news." Samuel dropped the cane. He raised the revolver. "I have 6 bullets. There are 5 of you. I like those odds." "Kill him!" Jasper screamed. The men charged. The room erupted in chaos. Samuel fired. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots, 3 men down. But the 4th man tackled him before he could fire again. The gun skittered across the stone floor. Samuel roared, grappling with the thug. He used his elbows and knees with brutal efficiency, a fighting style learned in the dirt of Kandahar, not the boxing rings of Eton. He snapped the man's arm and threw him into the wall. But while Samuel was distracted, Jasper lunged. He grabbed Elleraine by the hair, dragging her chair backward, and pressed the knife to her throat. "Stop!" Jasper shrieked. "Or I open her up!" Samuel froze. He stood over the unconscious body of the last thug, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, blinding him. "Drop it," Jasper commanded. Samuel held up his hands. "Let her go, Jasper. It's me you want. I have the ledger." "You?" Jasper narrowed his eyes. "Where?" "In my head," Samuel lied. "I memorized it. Every name, every date. Kill her, and you lose the leverage. Kill me, and the information dies. But my solicitors have a copy set to be mailed to Prime Minister Salisbury in the morning, if I don't check in." It was a bluff, a magnificent, desperate bluff. Jasper hesitated. In that split second of indecision, Elleraine acted. She couldn't move her arms, but her legs were free. She slammed her heel down hard onto Jasper's instep. Jasper howled in pain, his grip loosening just a fraction. Elleraine threw her head back, smashing her skull into his nose. There was a sickening crunch. Jasper stumbled back, dropping the knife. "Samuel!" Elleraine screamed. Samuel didn't need telling. He closed the distance in a heartbeat. He didn't punch Jasper. He grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the stone pillar. "You touched her," Samuel whispered, his voice sounding like tearing metal. "You dared to touch her," he squeezed. Jasper clawed at Samuel's hands, his face turning purple, his legs kicking uselessly. "Samuel, stop!" Elleraine yelled. "He's not worth it. If you kill him, you're a murderer. Let the law take him." Samuel's eyes were glazed with a berserker fury. He wanted to crush the life out of the man who had threatened his wife. But Elleraine's voice cut through the red haze. "Wife." He looked at Elleraine. She was bruised, bleeding, her dress ruined, but she was looking at him with fear. Not fear of him, but fear for him. Samuel released his grip. Jasper slid to the floor, gasping and retching. Samuel walked over to Elleraine and untied the ropes with trembling hands. As soon as she was free, she collapsed into him. He caught her, burying his face in her hair. "I thought I lost you," the cold Duke whispered, his voice breaking. "I thought I lost you." The aftermath was a blur of police whistles and flashing cameras. Inspector Aberline of Scotland Yard, a real historical figure known for his integrity, arrived personally to take Jasper Sterling into custody. Elleraine, shaking but resolute, ripped the hem of her petticoat and produced the pages of the ledger. "Here," she said to the inspector. "This is everything." Aberline scanned the pages, his mustache twitching. "Good God. This will bring down half the House of Lords." He looked at Samuel. "You have done the crown a great service, Your Grace. And you, Your Grace." He nodded to Elleraine. They were escorted out of the opera house, not as fugitives, but as heroes. But the silence between them in the carriage ride back to Ashdown Manor was deafening. When they arrived, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a dull ache. They stood in the grand foyer. The servants were asleep. It was just the two of them. "You're bleeding," Elleraine said softly, reaching out to touch the cut on his forehead. Samuel flinched away. He turned his back on her, walking to the fireplace and gripping the mantelpiece until his knuckles turned white. "The danger is over," Samuel said, his voice flat. "Jasper will hang. The syndicate is exposed. You are safe." "Yes," Elleraine said, feeling a sudden, terrible coldness in her chest. "We did it. I have arranged for a cottage for you in Cornwall," Samuel continued, staring into the dying embers of the fire. "It is secluded. Quiet. You will have a generous allowance. No one will know who you were." Elleraine felt as if he had slapped her. "Cornwall? You're sending me away?" "The agreement was a ruse, Elleraine, a temporary measure for your survival. You are free now." "Free?" Elleraine stepped closer. "Is that what you think I want? To be paid off like a servant? You deserve a life." Samuel spun around, and for the first time, Elleraine saw the torture in his eyes. "Look at me, Elleraine. I am a monster. I am the cold Duke. I have spent my life in shadows and violence. Tonight I almost killed a man with my bare hands. I enjoyed it." He paced the room. "You are light. You are brave and intelligent and good. I cannot drag you into my darkness. I cannot be the husband you deserve." "You don't get to decide what I deserve," Elleraine shouted. She had never raised her voice to him. But she was furious now. "You think you're protecting me? You're just a coward, Samuel Thorne." Samuel stopped dead. "A coward? Yes, you can fight assassins and anarchists, but you're terrified of feeling something. You're terrified that the cold Duke might actually have a heart." She walked right up to him, invading his space, forcing him to look at her. "You saved my life in that alley. You respected me. You protected me. And tonight, when you looked at me in that cellar, that wasn't acting. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you feel nothing, and I will leave." Samuel looked down at her. He traced the line of her jaw with a finger, terrified he might break her. "I cannot tell you that," he whispered. "Because it would be a lie. I have loved you since the moment you stood in that alley and refused to scream." Elleraine let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for days. "Then don't send me to Cornwall." "But the scandal," Samuel argued weakly. "The marriage is a fake. If we continue, we have to live a lie forever." Elleraine smiled, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "Actually, about that." The weeks following the arrest of Jasper Sterling were a strange, suspended purgatory for Ashdown Manor. The fog that had choked London seemed to have retreated, leaving behind a crisp, biting winter chill that frosted the windows of the great estate. To the outside world, the scandal was the most delicious meal served in a decade. The newspapers were insatiable. They reported that the cold Duke had single-handedly dismantled a treasonous cabal to save his young bride. Jasper Sterling was currently rotting in Newgate Prison, awaiting a trial that would undoubtedly end at the end of a rope. The Prime Minister himself had sent a letter of commendation to Samuel. But inside the manor, the silence was deafening. Elleraine Vance stood in the centre of the master suite, a room she had shared with a duke for 14 days. Her trunk was packed. It sat at the foot of the four-poster bed, a stark wooden box that contained the few meagre possessions she had brought from her old life, along with the fine silk dresses Samuel had insisted she keep. She ran her hand over the velvet duvet. The memory of the cellar beneath the opera house, the smell of damp earth, the terrifying grip of Jasper's hand, and the look in Samuel's eyes when he realized she was safe, was etched into her mind. Since that night, Samuel had retreated. He had become a ghost in his own home. He spent his days in the library with his solicitors and his nights pacing the corridors. He was polite, distant, and utterly heartbreaking. He was sending her away. He had arranged for a cottage in Cornwall, a generous annuity, and a new identity. He claimed it was for her safety. He claimed that being the Duchess of Ashdown put a target on her back that would never truly be removed. But Elleraine knew the truth. He wasn't protecting her from assassins anymore. He was protecting her from himself. He was convinced that his darkness would eventually swallow her whole. There was a soft knock at the door. "Enter," Elleraine said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. Henderson the butler stepped in. His usually impassive face looked pained. "The carriage is ready, Your Grace. His Grace is waiting in the library to finalize the arrangements." "Thank you, Henderson." Elleraine took a deep breath. She adjusted the high collar of her traveling dress. She had made a decision. She would walk into that library, sign his papers, and leave. But she would not leave him with the lie that she was merely grateful. She would leave him with the truth, even if it destroyed him. She descended the grand staircase, the house feeling vast and empty. The portraits of the Ashdown ancestors seemed to watch her with pity. The library was dim, lit only by the fire and a few lamps, Despite the morning sun trying to break through the heavy drapes, the air smelled of old paper, leather, and the unique, sharp scent of sandalwood that Elleraine had come to associate with Samuel. He was standing by the window, looking out at the frost-covered gardens. He didn't turn when she entered. His posture was rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. "The roads are clear," Samuel said, his voice devoid of inflection. "You should reach the coast by tomorrow evening. I have sent 2 outriders to ensure you are not followed." "You are thorough, as always," Elleraine said, walking to the massive oak desk. On the desk lay a neat stack of documents, a deed to the cottage in St. Ives, a bank book in the name of Elleraine Vane, a slight alteration, and a document titled Annulment of False Pretenses. Samuel finally turned. He looked exhausted. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath his eyes, and the lines of his face were drawn tight. He looked at her, and for a second the mask slipped, revealing a hunger so raw it made Elleraine's knees weak. Then the ice returned. "These are the final papers," Samuel said, gesturing to the desk. "Once you sign the annulment declaration, our ruse is officially over. The marriage was never consummated, never recorded in the parish register, and therefore it never existed. You will be free." Elleraine picked up the quill. The feather felt heavy in her hand. "Free," she repeated. "Is that what you call it?" "It is what it is," Samuel said, walking over to pour himself a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly. "You can have a life, Elleraine. A husband who doesn't have enemies in every shadow. Children who don't have to learn how to spot a tail before they can read." "And what about you?" Elleraine asked, dropping the quill. It clattered loudly on the wood. "You stay here? Alone in this fortress? Freezing to death?" "I'm the Duke of Ashdown," he said softly. "I was born to the cold. I am used to it." "You are a liar," Elleraine said. Samuel stiffened. "I beg your pardon." "You are a liar, Samuel Thorne," she said, her voice rising. She walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. "You told me in the carriage that you felt nothing. You told me you were incapable of love. But I saw you in the cellar. I felt your heart beating when you held me. You love me." Samuel closed his eyes. "Elleraine, don't." "Say it," she demanded. "Look me in the eye and tell me you don't love me, and I will sign your paper and leave. But if you lie, I will know." Samuel opened his eyes. They were stormy, filled with a mixture of rage and despair. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip hard. "Yes! God help me, yes! I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. I look at you, and I see the only clean thing I have ever touched, and that is why you have to go." He released her as if burned and turned away. "My love is a curse, Elleraine. Everyone I have ever loved has died. My parents, my brother, my men in Kandahar. I will not add your name to a gravestone." "So you would rather add it to a list of regrets?" Elleraine asked quietly. "I would rather you be alive and hate me than dead and loved by me." He pointed to the desk. "Sign the papers, Elleraine, please, before I lose the strength to let you go." Elleraine looked at the man she had fallen in love with. She saw his stubbornness, his misguided nobility. She realized that arguing with him was useless. He had made up his mind to be a martyr. But Elleraine was an archivist. She dealt in facts, in records, and in the fine print of history, and she had prepared for this moment. She walked to the desk. She picked up the annulment of false pretenses. She read it over, her expression unreadable. "I cannot sign this," she said. Samuel sighed, a sound of infinite weariness. "Elleraine, we have discussed this. The solicitors—" "No," Elleraine interrupted. "I mean I physically cannot sign this. It would be perjury, and perjury is a crime." Samuel frowned. "Perjury? What are you talking about? It merely states that we are not married." "But we are," Elleraine said. "We are not," Samuel snapped, his patience fraying. "We stood in a hallway and told a lie to a butler. That is not a marriage." "Do you remember the first night?" Elleraine asked, leaning against the desk, her posture relaxing as she took control of the room. "You were drinking brandy. You were bleeding from the fight in the alley. You gave me a stack of papers to sign." "The non-disclosure agreements," Samuel nodded. "To ensure you didn't sell the story of the ledger to the press. Standard procedure for anyone entering my employment or confidence." "Yes," Elleraine smiled. "You handed them to me. You were distracted. You were reloading your Webley. You didn't read them before you passed them across the desk." "I drafted them myself years ago. I know what they said." "You know what the top one said," Elleraine corrected. She reached into the bodice of her dress, a hiding place she had learned was surprisingly secure, and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. It was yellowed, heavy, and sealed with a wax crest that was cracked with age. "I found this in the library while you were arguing with the police outside," Elleraine said. "It was in a display case, a fascinating document. The Ashdown Covenant of 1704. Samuel froze. His face went pale. That is an archaic curiosity. It has no legal standing." "Actually," Elleraine said, unfolding the document, "I checked with the solicitor in Fleet Street 2 days ago. He says it is still active. It was a royal decree granted to the first Duke of Ashdown, allowing him to bypass the church bans during times of war or imminent peril to secure the succession." She smoothed the paper out on the desk, covering the annulment papers. "The covenant states," Elleraine read, her voice clear and precise, "that if the Duke declares a woman his wife in the presence of witnesses and signs a written statement of intent, and she signs in return, the union is binding in the eyes of God and the Crown." Samuel stared at the paper. "But I never signed a statement of intent." "You signed the bottom of the paperwork you gave me," Elleraine said. "You thought you were witnessing my NDA. But I had slipped this underneath the cover sheet." She pointed to the bottom of the ancient parchment. There, in Samuel's bold, aggressive scrawl, was his signature. And right beside it, Elleraine's neat, archivist hand. "You signed it," Elleraine whispered. "And Henderson and the footman heard you declare me your wife in the foyer." The imminent peril clause was satisfied by the assassins chasing us. Samuel looked from the paper to Elleraine. His mouth opened, then closed. He picked up the document, his eyes scanning the Latin text, the heavy seal, and finally the signatures. He dropped the paper. He looked as if he had been struck by a cannonball. "You," he stammered. "You tricked me." "I secured my position," Elleraine said. "I knew who you were, Samuel. I knew you were the cold Duke. I knew that once the danger passed, you would try to discard me. You would try to be noble and send me away. I couldn't let you do that." "You bound yourself to me," Samuel whispered, his voice trembling. "To a man you barely knew? To a life of danger?" "I bound myself to the man who saved my life," Elleraine said firmly. "I made a bet, Samuel. I bet that the man behind the ice was worth the risk. And I was right." She took a step back. "So, you see, Your Grace, you cannot annul the marriage. We are legally, irrevocably, and historically wed. If you want to get rid of me now, you will have to divorce me. And that would require a scandal that would make Jasper Sterling's treason look like a tea party." The silence in the library stretched out. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked loudly. Tock, tock, tock. Samuel stood frozen. He looked at the woman standing before him. She was small, fierce, and utterly terrifying. She had outmaneuvered him. She had outsmarted the cold Duke in his own home, with his own history. A low sound started in Samuel's chest. It rumbled up his throat. It was a laugh. It wasn't the polite, dry chuckle of society. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh of pure disbelief and relief. He laughed until he had to grip the edge of the desk for support. "I spent my life fearing that someone would trap me," Samuel gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. "I spent years building walls, hiring guards, checking shadows, and you walked in with a ledger and a pen and captured me without firing a shot." "I am a very good archivist," Elleraine said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I know how to file things permanently." Samuel walked around the desk. The darkness that had clung to him for weeks seemed to evaporate. He looked at Elleraine not as a victim, not as a responsibility, but as an equal. He stopped inches from her. He reached out and took her face in his hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "I intended to save you," Samuel murmured. "I intended to be the hero who sacrificed his happiness for your safety." "You are a terrible hero," Elleraine whispered. "And you," Samuel said, leaning down, his forehead resting against hers, "are a magnificent villain. You have sentenced yourself to a life with a monster." "I'm not afraid of monsters," Elleraine said. "I married one, and I plan to tame him." "Then you had better start," Samuel growled playfully, "because I have no intention of letting you go. Not to Cornwall. Not anywhere." He kissed her. It wasn't the tentative kiss of the first night, nor the desperate kiss of the cellar. It was a kiss of possession, of promise, and of a deep, abiding joy that melted the last of the frost on the windows. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Samuel turned to the door. "Henderson!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the house. The door opened instantly. Henderson had clearly been eavesdropping. "Your Grace, unpack the Duchess's trunk," Samuel ordered, his arm wrapped firmly around Elleraine's waist. "And burn the carriage schedule. We aren't going anywhere." "Very good, Your Grace," Henderson said. And for the first time in 20 years, the butler smiled. Samuel turned back to Elleraine. He picked up the ancient covenant from the desk. "We should frame this," he said, looking at the document. "A warning to our children." "Children?" Elleraine raised an eyebrow. "Well," Samuel grinned, the expression transforming his face into something devastatingly handsome. "The covenant does mention securing the succession. And as a man who respects history, I feel we should adhere to the terms of the contract." "Is that a command, Your Grace?" "No, Elleraine," Samuel said, pulling her toward the door, leaving the library and the darkness behind them forever. "That is a surrender. And that is the incredible story of Elleraine Vance and the cold Duke, Samuel Thorne. From a foggy alleyway in London to the dark secrets of the Opera House, they proved that sometimes the only way to survive is to trust the one person you're supposed to fear. What did you think of Elleraine's secret move at the end? Did she trap him, or did she save him? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this Victorian romance thriller, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have a vampire romance coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.